Welcome back to the channel, everybody. First, let's go back to the beginning so everybody is clear. September 10th, 2025, Utah Valley University, middle of the day. Charlie Kirk is speaking at an outdoor event, then one shot from a distance. He's hit in the neck and later dies at the hospital. People panic, crowd scatters, total chaos. Now, investigators immediately believe this was a long range shot from a rooftop. They find a rifle, footprints, palm prints, other physical evidence, and eventually they arrest the 22-year-old man, Tyler Robinson. He gets charged with aggravated murder. Prosecutors even say they may seek the death penalty. So from the outside, people think, case closed. But not so fast.
Yeah.
But here's where things start getting complicated. Because in a case like this, one thing matters more than anything else. Can you prove the bullet came from that gun? That's called ballistics. It's how they match a bullet to a specific weapon. And this is where everything changes. Now let's talk about the bullet. The bullet recovered from Charlie Kirk's body was tested by federal experts, specifically the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. And here's what they found. They could not definitively match that bullet to the rifle tied to Robinson. Let me say that again in plain English. They cannot prove that the bullet came from his gun. Now, this is where people start jumping to conclusions. Some people are saying, that means he didn't do it. Slow down. That's not what it means. What the report actually says is inconclusive. Not a match, but also not a non-match. Just inconclusive. That happens when the bullet is damaged, fragments are too small, or there isn't enough detail to compare. And in this case, the bullet fragment was heavily damaged. But here's the problem. Even though inconclusive doesn't prove innocence, it also doesn't prove guilt. And that's why this is becoming a major issue in the case. Now let's talk about why people are starting to question these things. The defense is saying, if you can't match the bullet to the gun, how do you prove he fired the shot? That's a fair question, because in a shooting case, the strongest evidence usually looks like this: gun, bullet, victim. A clear chain, and right now the chain has a break in it. Now, the prosecution isn't just relying on the bullet. They're saying they have other evidence. DNA tied to the weapon. Text messages where he allegedly talked about the shooting. Statements he made to people after the incident. So their case is, it's not just the bullet, it's everything together. But here's where the tension comes in. Because the defense is pushing back hard, they're saying there are multiple DNA contributors on the evidence. There are hundreds of thousands of files still being reviewed, and now the bullet can't be matched. So what they're doing is trying to slow this case down. They're even asking to delay hearings to go through all the evidence. Now, let's talk about where the case stands right now. This is important. Tyler Robinson is charged in custody and still awaiting trial. He has not been convicted. He hasn't even entered a plea yet. And the trial itself may not even happen until late 2026 because of how complex this case is. Now here's where this turns into something bigger. Because this is no longer just about one piece of evidence, it's about trust in the process. People are asking, if the bullet doesn't clearly match, what else might not be so clear? If the evidence takes this long to sort through, are we rushing to judgment? If there are multiple pieces of conflicting information, are we looking at the full picture? And on the other side, people are saying just because one piece of evidence is inconclusive doesn't mean the whole case falls apart. And that's also true. And here's the real issue: the case is not clean, it's not simple, it's not one of those situations where everything lines up perfectly. Instead, it's a case where some evidence points one way, some evidence raises questions, and the justice system has to sort it out piece by piece. Now, let me bring this back because this is what really matters. Right now, you have a high profile murder, a suspect facing the death penalty, a key piece of evidence, the bullet that cannot be clearly tied to the weapon. That's serious because when you talk about someone possibly losing their life in a death penalty case, everything has to be solid. Everything has to be on point. Not probably, not maybe, it has to be solid and on point. And at the same time, you also have a victim, a real person who was killed in broad daylight. Millions of people saw it. And a system trying to figure out exactly what happened and who is responsible. So this isn't a movie. There's no clean ending yet, no final answer to these questions. What you're watching right now is the middle of the process: evidence being tested, arguments being made, questions being raised. And that bullet just became one of the biggest questions in the entire case because it doesn't prove he didn't do it, but it also doesn't prove that he did. And until that gap gets filled, this case is going to stay exactly where it is right now, unsettled. And everybody is on one side of the aisle or the other. And it's going to stay under a microscope. I want you guys to put in the chat what you think about this story, what you think about the bullet, what you think whether he's the suspect, is the real killer or not. I want to hear that in the comment section, please. And I will see you guys in the next one.